The question now is that the amendment be agreed to. The question is that the debate be adjourned and the resumption of the debate be made an order of the day for a later hour this day, or for a later hour this day. Those in favour? Those against? I think the ayes have it. I call the clerk.
Private members' business, notice number 9, motion by the member for Kennedy relating to disallowance of regulations.
Prohibited Imports Amendment, Firearms and Firearm Magazines Regulation 2015, made under the Customs Act 1901 on the 6th of August 2015 and presented to the House on 10th of August 2015 be disallowed.
I call the member for Kennedy.
Sorry, Mr Speaker.
I call the member for Kennedy.
Mr Speaker, for those of us, and there seem to be very few in this place that read history books, for those of us that do read history books, they know the great march of history. There are some leaps forward. And one of the greatest leap forwards in the history of liberty and freedom was the writing of the Magna Carta by that wonderful man, Bishop Langston. Heaven only knows what we owe to the Christians, Mr Speaker. But in the Magna Carta, he said it is the right of an Englishman to bear arms, and the Crown has no right to take away an Englishman's right to bear arms. That was in the Magna Carta in 1215. In the Bill of Rights, which delivered democracy to the people of the world, it was in 1660 or whenever the hell it was, Mr Speaker, in the Bill of Rights, they enshrined the right to bear arms. Now, these are the greatest documents in human history, Mr Speaker. These are the greatest minds in all of human history that have sat down and thought about government, not the pygmies that populate this place in a passing moment, Mr Speaker. These are things that have lasted for 1,000 years. Mr Speaker, Thomas and Jefferson, and who will forget that phrase by John F. Kennedy, that when he had the Nobel Prize winners at the White House, he said this is the greatest aggregation of intellect in the history of the White House, with the possible exception of when Thomas Jefferson dined alone. Thomas Jefferson and those other great men who wrote the Declaration of Independence wrote into the Declaration of Independence the right to bear arms. For without that, the individual has no rights. The rights of power lie exclusively with government. Speaker, in the great debate over fishing closures in Queensland, we said in Queensland now, the only people with the right to bear arms are the people in uniforms. And it's pretty scary when you live in a society where the only people with the right to bear arms are the people in uniforms, Mr Speaker. For those of us who are of a conservative bent, and that most certainly does not include the Liberal Party, for those of us who are of a conservative bent, that believe in certain inalienable rights and freedoms, Mr Speaker, they believe in the right of the individual and that it prevails over the right of the Crown. And as the inheritors of the English-speaking cultures, no matter what our racial backgrounds are, in fact, the English-speaking peoples are led by a person whose forebears come out of Africa, Mr Speaker. When those rights of individuals are taken away from us and delivered to the Crown, we had a very good habit of cutting the head off the person who wore the crown. And in fact, the great bard said, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, Mr Speaker. And well, they might have said that. Because again and again, when they have tried to take away our rights, our fundamental rights, Mr. Speaker, when you say the rights to bear arms, one conjures up spectres of revolution. I don't. I conjure up spectres of my home. I look out my backyard and I've got beautiful gum trees and some nice paintings from some artists that I loved. And I see the grass on my little football oval back there and my pointer dogs hopping around. And I think, this is my home. I have a right to defend my home. No one has the right to take away from me the right to defend my home. And in the great debate of the Queensland Parliament, later to become the Premier of Queensland, Peter Beattie, I said, well, who's going to defend my home when the monsters of the night invade? He said, the police, of course. I said, I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that. The official response time is 50 minutes. So I think she's all over Red Rover, mate. By the time that 50 minutes gets up, that's if you are fortunate enough to be able to raise the police immediately to get them to come to you. Heavens, my experience is it takes you about 10 minutes to explain to the person what the address is when you ring up 000. But, Mr. Speaker, our own personal experience in my family, where there have been 13 break-ins for close and immediate family members, has been a little bit over 2 hours. So, I mean, saying that the police will defend my home, that is a silly thing to say. We love the police. We feel very comfortable that they're there. But to say that they're going to defend my home, the facts are that that is simply insulting my intelligence, Mr. Speaker. 2 hours later, by the way, on those 13 cases, I did take out the case where it was 2 weeks before the police arrived. You know, I've fully documented these cases, by the way, Mr. Speaker. So you've taken away my right to defend my home. You've taken away my right to be the king in my little castle. And if it's ever a great cry for those of us who come from English-speaking cultures, it is that an Englishman's home is his castle. And a castle is of its very nature, and the meaning of the word is defence. That it is mine to defend and protect. And you take away my right to defend and protect. Mr. Speaker, for those of us who are my age, they will recall that we were at war with our neighbours, Indonesia. They outnumbered us 20 or 30 to 1 in those days. And I was at an age where I was going to go to war. And it gets you thinking very, very clear. When we faced off, we had 300,000 SLR rifles and over 1 million semi-automatic rifles, which my brother and I had one each, Mr. Acting Speaker. Not good to pick a fight with people that have 1.3 million rifles. And you ask me, what is the only country in Europe that hasn't been invaded in the last 150 or 200 years, whatever it is, Mr. Speaker? The only country that hasn't been invaded is Switzerland. Why? Because every single home has an automatic rifle with 9 rounds. By law, Mr. Speaker. By law. And if you say, oh, geez whiz, there must be a lot of deaths over there, ask me what has the lowest death rate in Europe. Ask me what has the lowest death rate in Europe. Almost invariably it's Switzerland, Mr. Acting Speaker. The highest death rate in Europe was in East Germany, whilst it was still East Germany. The neighbouring countries have almost identical language, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, ask me at the highest death rate in Europe, East Germany, Mr. Speaker, where all guns were banned by the communists. And we all know the hallmark of totalitarian regime is that only the men in uniforms have guns. And you say, oh, we are not a totalitarian regime. Well, start looking in the mirror, my friend. Start looking in the mirror, my friend. But maybe we people that come from Northern Australia, and I speak to West Australians here as well, Because the Brisbane line was not a Brisbane line. The Brisbane line was a recommendation by General Mackay to the Parliament of Australia that Australia could not be defended, that if they took Rabaul and they were 10 days away from, Port Moresby, Japanese were 10 days away from taking Port Moresby, that if Port Moresby was taken, the air cover would go over the top of Australia, we could not stop the invasion, and there would be no way, with the troops that we had, that we would be able to defend anything else except what I call the golden boomerang. Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, up the coast of Brisbane. And that was all that was to be defended. All the rest, including Western Australia, was to be handed over to the enemy. And it was lightly called the Brisbane line. So, for people from North Queensland, maybe that our attitude towards these things is slightly coloured by the fact that last time we had a serious stoush with our neighbours, we had 1.3 million rifles. And for those who say modern warfare, what use a rifle? They will tell that to my friends that fought and died in Vietnam. There were a bunch of people running around in pyjama coats with AK-47 rifles, beat the devil out of the greatest military machine that the world had ever known. Wellington gave independence to Ireland because he would never see Great Britain go through the trauma and horror of guerrilla warfare that he had experienced in Spain. One of the greatest things I ever saw on television was the Barbarossa campaign on SBS. And they were interviewing this little old lady, and Ian Causley, one of my great colleagues from this place, rang me up and said, "You're watching?" Turn on the television. I said, "I'm already watching." He said, "Barbarossa?" I said, "Yeah." And they're interviewing this little old lady, and they said, so the Germans had taken 3/4 of your army. They're in control of more than half of your population. The war was over. You had lost. And she said, "Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know what was going on. So what did you do?" She said, "I got my family hunting rifle and shot a German soldier." They retaliated? Yes, she said they just grabbed 2 people in the street and shot them dead by way of retaliation. "So you stopped shooting German soldiers?" She said, "No, I went out and shot 2 German soldiers." And they retaliated? She said they put a cordon around a village of 102 people and they slaughtered everyone inside the village. "So then you stopped shooting German soldiers?" "No," she said, "I got 6 of my schoolmates and then we became 12 and we all got our family hunting rifles and we shot 100 German soldiers." And there is a message there for a little tiny country like Australia. There is a message there for those of us who love our country and want to protect our country, for those of us who love our home and our family and want to protect our home and our family and not give that power away to the state, the people in the uniforms, the king, the crown. Speaker, those are wonderful, high-flowing, philosophical points that I make. And if I may say so, Mr Speaker, I make them with force. Mr Speaker, let us come down to reality. In Queensland, we had no gun laws. In 1988, the year of the much maligned Jockey Peterson, we had no gun laws whatsoever. None. There were considerable firearms, but no gun laws at all. You could have whatever rifle you wanted, any time you wanted. I walked in off the street, bought an AK-47 one day because I thought it would be very useful, and anyone could do that any time they liked. We had 8 deaths with guns. 8. That's all. 8 deaths with guns. New South Wales with very, very stringent laws on firearms. They had 38 deaths with guns. With draconian laws in Victoria, a state 50% our size, they should have had 12 deaths with guns. They didn't have 12, they didn't have 24, they didn't have 36, they didn't have 48, they had 54 deaths with guns. Mr Speaker, the years after the gun ban, there were more deaths than the years before the gun ban. So I'm not going to go into the psychological reasons why this occurs, why it's a phenomenon that occurs throughout the world. All I'm going to say to you is that we're here today because there's further bans on guns. I must declare of pecuniary interest. I have a relative that's involved in the Adler that's being banned under this regulation. Mr Acting Speaker, and I ask myself, What do I withdraw from the battle and things I profoundly believe in because of a relative involved? No way, Mr. Speaker. That doesn't muzzle myself. In fact, the opposite may well be the case. Mr. Acting Speaker, the reasons given. This is where, you know, I'm in the ridiculousness nature of government. People here think they are governing. When you compare the governments that I proudly was a part of, we ran Queensland for 8,000 million, LNP couldn't run it for 51,000 million, the same state. Maybe a good comparison of our relative intelligence and capacity levels. The ALP couldn't run it for 49,000 million. We ran it for 8,000 million. And maybe we had some good ideas when we were governing Queensland. Mr. Acting Speaker, this process, they said, illegal action is a new technology.
Thank you, member.
Mr. Acting Speaker,
Member's time has expired. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Deputy Speaker, I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
The motion. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Is there any speakers to the motion? Okay, I'll call the member for Batman.